You know, there's a quiet worry that I hear from so many of you, our wonderful seniors. It's the feeling that as we get older, our kitchens, once a place of comfort and delicious meals, can sometimes become a source of confusion. We've been cooking our entire lives, so we think we know everything, right? But what if I told you that some of the most common things we do, the things our mothers and grandmothers taught us, might actually be doing more harm than good? It's a bitter truth, isn't it, to think that a simple habit we followed for decades could be spoiling our food faster, wasting our hard-earned money, and even making us sick? I'm talking about a tiny, innocent-looking mistake many of us make every single day. We open that refrigerator door and we put things inside that should never be there. Things like garlic, onions, or even that sweet ripe mango we just bought from the market. It's a habit so ingrained we don't even think about it. But in this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on this little secret. We'll uncover 9 common foods you should never put in the refrigerator and why doing so can ruin their flavor, texture, and nutritional value. And stay with me until the very end, because I'm going to reveal something about a popular Filipino breakfast food that will truly shock you. Let's start with a food that's probably in your kitchen right now. I'm talking about tomatoes. For so long we've been told that a cold fridge keeps food fresh, but for tomatoes, it's the opposite. Refrigerating them actually stops their ripening process dead in its tracks. Think about how a tomato gets its incredible flavor. It needs warmth and time to develop those sweet, tangy juices. When you put a tomato in the fridge, the cold air breaks down the membranes inside, turning the flesh mealy and watery. It loses that beautiful texture and that vibrant, fresh taste that makes our menudo or sinigang so delicious. You'll end up with a bland, sad-looking tomato that's only good for decoration. The best way to store tomatoes is to leave them on the counter, stem side up, in a single layer. This allows the air to circulate and for them to ripen naturally, just like they do on the vine. If they get too ripe, that's when you should use them immediately in your cooking, not tuck them away in the cold. It's a small change, but it makes a world of difference to the flavor of your dishes. And what about our second item? You know, the one we use to make our adobo and pancit so fragrant. I'm talking about garlic. We all know the saying, Filipino food isn't Filipino food without garlic. But did you know that putting garlic in the refrigerator can cause it to become rubbery and even start to mold? The cold, humid environment of a fridge is not what garlic needs. It thrives in a cool, dark, and dry place. When you put it in the fridge, it absorbs moisture, which can make it sprout and go bad much faster. The ideal place for garlic is in a breathable container, like a mesh bag, in a cupboard, away from direct sunlight. The same goes for our next food item, which is just as important in our local cuisine: onions. Just like garlic, onions need to be stored in a cool, dry, and dark place. When you put them in the refrigerator, they soften, get mushy, and the moisture causes them to mold quickly. Worse, they can transfer their strong smell to other foods, making your butter or eggs taste and smell like onions. So, for both garlic and onions, let's get them out of the fridge and into a nice dry spot in the pantry. Now let's talk about something many of us love, especially as a snack: potatoes. I've seen so many people store potatoes in the fridge thinking it will make them last longer. But what actually happens is the cold air converts the potato's starch into sugar. This not only affects the taste but also changes their texture. When you cook them, they can turn grainy and gritty. This also leads to the creation of a chemical called acrylamide when the potatoes are fried or roasted at high temperatures. While it's not a huge concern in small amounts, it's something to be mindful of. The best way to store potatoes is in a paper bag or a basket in a cool, dark place like a pantry. This keeps them fresh, firm, and tasting exactly as they should. Now let's continue with a food that's a staple in our homes, something we use in countless recipes: coffee. I know it seems like a good idea to put that ground coffee or those beans in the fridge to keep them fresh, but the exact opposite is true. Coffee is highly porous, and in a refrigerator, it acts like a sponge, absorbing all the smells from the other foods around it: the garlic, the onions, the leftover adobo. This means your morning coffee will taste like a strange, unpleasant medley of your week's meals. The moisture in the fridge also causes the oils in the coffee to break down, which robs it of its rich aroma and flavor. The best place for coffee is in an airtight container at room temperature. This will keep the beans or grounds fresh and preserve that wonderful, invigorating aroma we all love. Speaking of things that lose their flavor, let's talk about honey. Many of us buy a big jar of honey and put it straight into the fridge, assuming it will last longer. But what happens is the cold temperature causes the honey to crystallize and solidify. It becomes thick, cloudy, and difficult to pour, almost like a solid block of sugar. You'll have to go through the trouble of warming it up just to use it. And even then, it never really goes back to its original smooth texture. Honey is naturally a very stable food and will last indefinitely in your pantry at room temperature, as long as it's in a sealed jar. So save the space in your fridge and keep your honey where it belongs, in your pantry. Next up, let's discuss something we all love for our pain de sal or morning toast: bread. Storing bread in the fridge might seem like a good way to prevent it from molding, especially in our humid climate. But the cold temperature actually causes bread to go stale much faster. The starch molecules in the bread, which are responsible for its soft, fluffy texture, recrystallize and harden in the cold. It becomes tough, dry and chewy, losing all its delicious freshness. The best way to store bread is in a bread box or a pantry at room temperature. If you have too much bread and want to save it for later, the freezer is a much better option. Just slice it first and you can take out a slice or two at a time and toast it directly. And here's a tip for something we all enjoy, especially during the summer: bananas. We often put bananas in the fridge to keep them from getting overripe. But the cold air actually blackens the peels and stops them from ripening. While the inside of the banana might still be okay for a little while, the peel will look unappetizingly dark, and the banana will lose its sweet flavor. The best way to store bananas is to leave them on the counter, hanging from a banana hook if you have one. This allows air to circulate and prevents bruising. If they are already ripe and you want to keep them from spoiling, that's when you can put them in the fridge, as the cold will preserve them for a few extra days. Just don't do it when they're still green. Now, let's move on to something that's a beloved treat for many of us, especially during the holidays, but one that's often stored incorrectly: pineapples. A whole pineapple should never be stored in the fridge. The cold air affects the texture and flavor, making it dry and less sweet. A whole uncut pineapple is best stored on the counter at room temperature. Once you've cut it, however, that's when it needs to go in the fridge, in an airtight container, to prevent it from spoiling. Just don't put the whole fruit in there. So, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? We've talked about how keeping tomatoes on the counter keeps their flavor vibrant for our menudo. We've learned that garlic and onions need a cool, dry, dark space to stay fresh for our adobo. We discovered that putting potatoes in the pantry keeps them from turning sweet and grainy. We found out that our coffee will taste so much better if we keep it sealed in the pantry instead of the fridge, and that honey and bread should also be kept at room temperature to preserve their texture and taste. And of course, keeping whole pineapples and bananas out of the cold helps them ripen perfectly and retain their wonderful flavor. Now, for that surprising food I promised you. It's one of the most common things we put in our refrigerators. A food we have for breakfast, lunch or dinner, and a staple in every Filipino household. I'm talking about eggs. I know, you're thinking, but my nanay always put the eggs in the fridge. And it's true. In many parts of the world, including the Philippines, we're taught to refrigerate eggs. But here's the shocker. Eggs in the Philippines are unwashed and have a natural protective layer on their shell called the cuticle. This layer prevents bacteria from entering and keeps the eggs fresh for a long time at room temperature. Washing them or refrigerating them removes this protective layer, making them more susceptible to spoiling. It's a big difference from eggs in other countries, which are often washed before packaging and require refrigeration. Storing our local eggs in a cool, dry place like a pantry is perfectly fine and often preferred. Of course, once you wash them, or if they've been stored in the fridge for a while, it's best to continue refrigerating them. It's a habit passed down through generations, but understanding the science behind it can help us make a more informed choice for our health and our food. Remember, my friends, these are just a few simple adjustments we can make in our homes. Small changes like where we store our food can have a big impact on the taste of our meals, the freshness of our ingredients, and even our budget by reducing food waste. The wisdom we've gained over a lifetime is a treasure, but there's always something new to learn and improve upon. Don't be afraid to try new things and question old habits, especially when it comes to living a healthier, happier life. I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the food storage habits you've changed over the years? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this information helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tips and advice on living your best life at every age. Thank you for spending this time with me today. And remember, every day is a new opportunity to learn, to grow, and to take care of yourself. Live your best life at every age.